I hope you've already seen my first YouTube video called First, Why We Need the Fair Tax. It began to describe the fair tax. This video expands on that. Is the fair tax 23% or 30%? Take your pick. When we pay state sales taxes, we figure the percentage on top of the price. Under the fair tax, the 23% by law will be included in the label price. When you purchase a $100 item, the tax is $23, which is 30% of the $77 the retailer gets to keep. I call it 23% because we call the FICA payroll tax for Social Security and Medicare 15.3% of gross income rather than 18% of take-home pay. And we describe the 5 income tax brackets as percentages of adjusted gross income rather than percentages of after-tax income. At the mid-range, we call it 25% of AGI rather than 33% of after-tax. Since the fair tax replaces payroll and income taxes, I call it 23% to compare it with them rather than 30% to compare it with state sales taxes, which it does not replace. Will prices go up? As embedded costs go away, every sector in business will price differently in response to competition. Reduce prices, increase employees' take-home pay, or take more profit. In any case, purchasing power will remain the same. Instead of the prebate, why don't we just exempt groceries and medical care? The prebate, even though it costs $489 billion a year, is more helpful than anything to the very poorest among us. They have great difficulty qualifying for the earned income tax credit, which audits indicate is badly abused. The prebate helps make the fair tax more progressive than what we have now. Also, we don't need the government deciding which groceries or non-critical medical services are essential. Why tinker with the payroll tax? The payroll tax is extremely regressive and intergenerational. It stops taxing 15.3% for Medicare and Social Security at $102,000 of income. For most Americans, payroll is the largest tax they pay. We can't really reform taxes and get the progressivity needed without replacing the payroll tax along with the income tax. Will the fair tax cripple the housing market or charities? Well, if you don't pay any income tax, you don't need the home mortgage interest deduction. Interest rates are expected to decline about 1/4 with the fair tax. Overall, the fair tax should stimulate the housing industry. Gifts to charities will be made with pre-tax dollars by everyone, not just those who itemize. The Beacon Hill Institute estimates charitable giving will actually go up 1% with the fair tax. What's also interesting is that charities such as churches will not have to worry about losing their tax-exempt status when they express their views on issues that concern them. What will be the cost to transition to the fair tax? There's about $2 trillion in unsold inventory in the U.S. on which taxes have already been paid. As this inventory gets sold, H.R. 25 allows a percentage, about $600 billion in total, as an inventory credit. Economists Glenn Hubbard and Alan Greenspan say the transition will be uneventful. As we've mentioned, the fair tax taxes twice as much economic activity, making it much fairer. It taxes services, which have grown to become 60% of personal consumption. This gets the government out of picking winners and losers. It taxes existing wealth when it's spent, making it more progressive. People I talk to like the fact that for the first time we'll be taxing the underground economy directly rather than indirectly with embedded costs. The underground is estimated to be 9% of GDP and growing faster than GDP. Drug dealers, 12 to 18 million undocumented immigrants, tourists, and excuse the expression, cash-only cheats, will be taxed when they go to spend their secret earnings. The prebate will be a big incentive for the undocumented to become documented. Education is not taxed. Tuition for education and job training is considered an investment. The babysitter who earns less than $1,200 per year will not have to collect taxes. Governments are taxed. This is largely a wash because they already pay embedded costs in what they purchase. This prevents their gaining a competitive advantage over private organizations. Borrowing is taxed on the amount by which the interest rate exceeds the rate on Treasury securities with the same maturity. Consumption turns out to be more reliable than income as a revenue source. The current expenditures of individuals are more closely related to their lifetime income than to their current income, which goes up and down. Evasion will go down. Instead of taxing 165 million individuals and businesses in a complex manner, The fair tax will tax 25 million businesses in a simple manner. 92,000 of these businesses account for 85% of all sales. Instead of one person falsifying one number on a return, it takes two to cheat under the fair tax, and the rewards of each instance of cheating are small. If you think someone is cheating, you call 1-800-TAX-CHEAT and you might get a reward. It's time we made our federal tax policy neutral between debt and equity and neutral between industries and companies. I like the greater respect we'll have for personal privacy. The government won't need to probe into the most intimate details of our lives to see how much we owe. The favoritism we now show to imports that haven't been taxed at their source will be gone. The fair tax will devolve power away from Washington, something we need to do. Half of the 32,000 lobbyists in Washington are there to game the tax code to hide corporate welfare. They'll move their skills into productive pursuits, and their client companies will focus on serving customers rather than getting a single partner, the federal government, to be their angel. By taxing consumption of wealth rather than creation of wealth, we'll get increased savings, investment, productivity, and jobs. It takes 100,000 on average to create a new job, and we need more of them. The well-being of Americans will improve 1 trillion per year or more. Let's see how that happens. The numbers in this table are percentage changes. Under the fair tax, models indicate that GDP will rise in about 3 years by 10%. As our experience since 1950 has shown, that's the only way to increase revenues. Domestic investment will be about 75% higher very quickly. Employment and wages will each be about 10% higher. Consumption will drop about 1% in the first 3 years and then rise slowly. How does the fair tax compare with the flat tax or the value-added tax? The system we have now began as a flat tax 95 years ago. Now 2/3 of filers seek help with their returns, and when you call the IRS, you have less than a 60% chance of getting the correct answer. With the VAT, taxes are calculated and hidden at all levels, all through the chain of production, a heaven for lobbyists. Milton Friedman said, quote, "The VAT is the most efficient way to raise taxes and the most effective way to increase the size of government," unquote. Consumers think increases in VAT taxes are just more inflation. Countries that have the VAT have economies that are suffering. How does the fair tax affect people at different income levels? Usually a family of 4 earning below 30,000 gets their taxes rather than pays their taxes. People earning about 20,000 to 30,000 will receive about the same as now. For people below 20,000, the fair tax is a real boon. Isn't it time for an effective way to help the poorest? At the poverty level, you pay no taxes. At twice the poverty level, say lower middle income, your tax will be half of 23%, 11.5%, which is less than your tax now. Further up in the middle class, you're probably now paying 33% of your marginal earnings, and instead you'll pay 23% of your marginal spending. Over the entire earnings curve, up to and beyond 100,000, even assuming you spend what you earn, you're better off with the fair tax. Seniors will be taxed on existing retirement savings as they're spent, instead of paying the embedded costs. But future benefits received from Social Security and pensions will not be taxed until they're spent. Will the fair tax ever happen? It's up to you. Don't expect the fair tax to come from Washington lobbyists or from presidential candidates. From the grassroots, we need to let our representatives know that the economic stimulus package we really need is the fair tax. Here's what you can do. Go to fairtax.org to support the only organization whose sole mission is to promote the fair tax. Look up fair tax in Wikipedia. Buy the most recent fair tax book by Neal Boortz. I hope you'll join this movement and become a student, supporter, and promoter of the fair tax. Email your friends and suggest they look up Dan Dyer 4 on YouTube to see and hear this presentation. Thank you.